All right, so the BIS dropped a working paper the other day on the 19th titled Artificial Intelligence and Growth in Advanced and Emerging Economies, the Short Run Impact. And I wanted to make a video on it because I believe this working paper, this document is very important given our current trajectory, given our current day and age. So let's go ahead and dive into it. It's a pretty quick, pretty short PDF, and it starts off by stating over the last couple of years, the global adoption of generative artificial intelligence, known as Gen AI, by individuals and organizations has surged dramatically, sparking an intense debate about its economic effects. The prevailing view is that this technological innovation will enhance worker productivity and spur firm growth and innovation. As aggregate productivity rises, Gen AI could have a significant positive impact on the global economy. Now, it states although Gen AI represents a general purpose technology that is transforming cognitive capabilities, its impact is not expected to be uniform across individuals, occupations, and industries. It states first gen AI mainly enhances cognitive and knowledge intensive activities, for example, professional services such as finance and IT, while tasks with substantial physical components, for example, construction, are expected to be less affected. Second, AI adoption may not be practical or beneficial for all firms and workers. Adoption rates and usage intensity remain low among less educated and older population groups. I don't know if any of you have noticed that, but it's pretty common if you really think about it. Older groups are not really keen on getting in line with AI or even understanding AI for that matter. And it's just going to continue to be the case when time goes on. So their future trajectory is uncertain, as one may assume. Now, it states productivity gains from AI at the firm or sector level may also fail to translate into equivalent macroeconomic gains. Broader economic factors, including frictions in adoption, potential disruptions to production networks, and regulation, mean that generative AI driven improvements may not simply aggregate into a sum of sectoral effects. Moreover, the benefits of Gen AI are unlikely to be distributed evenly across countries. And this is the key here. They're kind of sounding the alarm on AI, and more importantly, over the distribution of the benefits of AI. And that's the part I really want to hone in here on this video. It states the aggregate growth impact of Gen AI is likely to depend critically on national production structures, particularly the relative size of sectors exposed to the new technology. Advanced economies, which I will state as AEs for the rest of this video or throughout this video, which tend to have a greater share of value added from early adopting sectors such as finance, healthcare, and advanced manufacturing, are expected to benefit more than emerging and developing economies known as EMDEs. In many EMDEs, knowledge intensive sectors are smaller and low skilled labor intensive manufacturing is more prominent than in advanced economies. This suggests that emerging and developing economies may be less affected by the productivity boost that is supposedly going to be brought out by AI. In other words, the accessibility and adoption of this general purpose technology may reinforce existing socioeconomic disparities by disproportionately benefiting certain sectors and countries over others. And in this paper, they state they examine whether the short run growth effects of Gen AI differ between AEs and EMDEs. And they state that their key hypothesis, which they test empirically, is that the growth impact of Gen AI is driven by sectoral differences in exposure to the technology and by country level characteristics that influence its adoption and its use. Now, on the one hand, they state sectors with a higher incidence of skilled labor are more exposed to productivity gains associated with Gen AI, and on the other hand, the heterogeneity, and the impact of AI on growth may reflect countries' differing levels of readiness to adopt AI. And they have some data that we're going to get into that I thought is very interesting. Now, they state from the quality of digital infrastructure to the regulatory environment. So that's what they're basing it off of, whether they're ready to adopt AI from the quality of digital infrastructure to the regulatory environment. They state our analysis focuses on short-term growth effects, abstracting from longer-run equilibrium dynamics. So this is where we get into the meat and potatoes of this document, and it starts to get good. They state we begin by identifying the exposure of each industry to Gen AI. We use industry level measure of AI exposure. They take from a lot of different studies here, which is tailored to the U.S. economy. We treat the U.S. distribution of sectoral exposures as a benchmark for all countries. This measure shows high exposure in service industries such as finance and education, which is to be expected, and low exposure in sectors such as agriculture and transport. And I believe because robotics hasn't caught up to generative AI as of yet, but I believe it will. We'll get into that in a second because they do discuss that. Now, they state to identify countries' readiness to use AI, we use the AI preparedness index, which I think is very interesting. They got this from the IMF, and it's called the AIPI. Just think about that for a second. Countries preparing for something, that means that something is going to happen. It means it's going to essentially take over and it's going to be part of everyday life. They state the measure captures 4 key dimensions, and I want you to focus on this. 4 key dimensions relevant for AI adoption: digital infrastructure, human capital, technological innovation, and legal frameworks. This measure reveals significant differences between advanced economies and emerging and developing economies. The median value for the index is about 1/3 higher in AEs than in EMDEs, although there is considerable heterogeneity within the latter group. Indeed, some EMDEs feature elevated AI preparedness that might provide important institutional and structural support for AI-driven growth. Using these measures of industry-level exposure to AI and country-level readiness to adopt the new technology, the BIS estimates the impact of their interaction on the growth rate of real value added in each industry country pair in 2022 and 23 after conditioning on country and industry fixed effects. So, a key contribution to their analysis is its global scope, which includes both advanced and emerging economies, an area of research that has received so far limited attention, right? That's the key. Limited attention in the literature on Gen AI's macroeconomic effects. So this is new. This is all new studying that is taking place here. and the research is new. They state our results show that for the same increase in AI preparedness of the economy, sectors with a high AI exposure experience greater growth in real value added than those with lower exposure. Comparing sectors at the 90th and 10th percentiles of AI exposure, a 1 standard deviation increase in AI preparedness is associated with a growth differential of approximately 2 percentage points. So it gets even better. We also show that this result is robust to the inclusion of several control variables. Among those, the stock of robots in use in the various sectors. This finding is important as robots are another technological innovation that could affect the relative growth rates between sectors, but their implications for white and blue collar workers are likely to differ from those of Gen AI, which makes perfect sense. Like I said, robots haven't caught up to Gen AI just yet. Now, taking the estimates of industry level AI exposures and conditioning on the different distribution of industries across countries, we then estimate that the short run growth impact of Gen AI is greater in advanced economies than in emerging economies. Anyone could have made that guess, that estimate. And they state in advanced economies, on average, the estimated increase in real value added growth is 0.6 percentage points higher than in the country with the lowest increase in the global sample. The corresponding effect is on average around 1/3 lower in emerging and developing economies, which also display considerable cross-country heterogeneity. Got it this time. Our estimates offer one of the first cross-country assessments of near-term growth effects of Gen AI adoption and their potential distributional implications. So here they really get into the implications of AI. They state our paper relates to various strands of literature on the implications of AI. These include evidence on productivity improvements at both the macro and the micro levels, the implications of AI for income inequality across countries, which is very important, on the diffusion of earlier technological innovations. So several studies have examined the effects of AI on productivity at the macroeconomic level, given their importance for broader growth implications, and they cite a lot of different studies. That said, almost all existing research focuses on advanced economies, particularly the United States, of course. One of the lowest estimated productivity gains from AI is reported in a study. An increase in total factor productivity, or TFP, of 0.07% annually, albeit over a decade. Now, substantially larger gains in productivity growth are found in several other studies that they note here. But to obtain macroeconomic productivity effects, the studies mentioned above draw on estimates of AI's productivity gains at the micro level. And these gains at the micro level have been documented to be generally large. So here is the real deal. Estimates of AI's macroeconomic productivity implications for countries other than the U.S., especially emerging and developing economies, are notably limited. As a result, econometric analysis of the differential impacts on countries' growth trajectories arising from AI adoption tends to be scarce. There are a few exceptions, however. For instance, estimate significantly lower AI exposures in emerging market and low-income countries compared to advanced economies, reflecting differences in economic structures. Based on 3 AI-related dimensions, exposure, preparedness, and access, and using a multi-sector global model, a study from 2025 found that growth impact of AI could be more than twice larger in advanced economies than in low-income countries. Focusing on Asia and the Pacific, another 2025 studies argues that AI could increase inequality between countries, given that most jobs that can be complemented by AI are concentrated in advanced economies rather than in low income countries. The BIS's approach differs from these studies in terms of methodology, as they adopt a framework similar to a 1998 study to examine how AI exposure and technological readiness interact to influence growth rates. Now, the differences in sectoral composition combined with varying degrees of technological readiness across countries result in diverging short-run growth trajectories. And they get into a lot of data here. Historical evidence on technology diffusion can provide insight into how AI adoption rates may vary in the future, while suggesting that emerging and developing countries are likely to be at a disadvantage, and that's the alarm bell. From a study in 2003 analyzing the diffusion of innovation since the late 1700s, find that technological advances have generally trickled down from advanced to lower income countries, with the speed of diffusion shaped by countries' human capital endowment and adoption of predecessor technologies. At the same time, both studies from 2010 and 2018 find that adoption lags have declined for more recent innovations. And a study from 2010 further document that variation in technology adoption accounts for at least 1/4 of per capita income differences across countries. So let's get into the data, and I think this is very interesting. The BIS states our estimation sample comprises 56 economies, 29 of which are classified as advanced, and 16 industries covering both manufacturing and services. They state we use three main sources of data. First, we use data on industry level exposure to AI. So this is AI industry level exposure, also known as AIIE. And they got that from a 2024 study. The authors construct this measure at the 2-digit level of the North American Industry Classification System, known as the NAICS, building on the indicators developed by Felton, which is a 2021 study. The measure draws on survey information regarding the extent to which Gen AI can be used across various workplace abilities and occupations, and aggregates this information to the sectoral level. As the data pertain to the United States, the implicit assumption in their study is that patterns of industry level exposure to AI are the same in emerging and developing economies and other advanced economies as in the United States. Now, this assumption is analogous to a study, the 1998 study, regarding external finance dependence across sectors. So, differently from the 2024 study, they aggregate the 20 sectors in the 1-digit NACE classification to 16 sectors. And this is when we start to really be able to compare things. This ensures compatibility between the AI exposure data and the other sources used in their analysis. Using the 16 industry structure, Figure 1 shows that finance, education, and information are the sectors with the highest AIIE scores, right? The AI scores, while agriculture, transport, and construction have the lowest industry level exposure. And we can see that right here. Agriculture, transport, construction, the lowest level of industry, AI industry exposure. I think that's going to change over time, but based off of their data that they got from recently, this is what we're seeing. And of course, we see finance, education, and information the absolute highest. So they state second, we use data on real value added by country and industry from the Asian Development Bank, ADB, Specifically, we draw on sectoral data from the ADB's multi-regional input-output tables, which are available at constant 2010 prices for 62 economies, plus an aggregated rest of the world, quote unquote. So they state here, comparing sectoral shares and total value added between emerging and advanced economies reveals some differences in the potential for AI adoption, as we can see in figure 2. In particular, some typically labor-intensive sectors are larger in emerging economies, most notably agriculture. Mining and manufacturing, on the other hand, also account for larger shares in emerging and developing economies, with the latter comprising about 1/5 of total value added. Now, in contrast, health and professional services, let me scroll down so you can see this, are typically larger in advanced economies. Somewhat unexpectedly, the data suggests that the wholesale and retail sector is larger in emerging economies, while the share of finance is similar between advanced economies and EMDEs, emerging and developing economies. These patterns are influenced by production structures in countries such as China, Korea, and Singapore. So we can see here in figure 2, it states exactly this right here, that manufacturing here, the share of industries in total real value added, manufacturing and wholesale and retail kind of up here at the top. So figure 3 shows the growth rate of real value added by sector from 2022 to 2023, differentiated by AEs and EMDEs. Now, their analysis of AI's impact on growth focuses on this period, which saw a rapid acceleration in Gen AI adoption. For example, according to a global survey conducted by McKinsey in April of 2023, the year was regarded as a pivotal moment, despite the short time since many Gen AI tools were launched. 1/3 of corporate respondents reported using Gen AI regularly in at least one business function. So think about what the usage of AI is going to be in the future. So here we see, third, we use data on AI preparedness from the IMF. And this has got to be the most important figure of data that they show here. The indicator measures a country's readiness to adopt AI along 4 dimensions: digital infrastructure, human capital, and labor market policies, innovation and economic integration, and regulation and ethics. Each of the 4 dimensions is computed across a set of associated indicators. Finally, the headline AIPI index is obtained as the sum of the 4 dimensions. It takes values between 0 and 1, with a higher value indicating greater AI preparedness, while the data used in their analysis pertain to the year 2023. Due to data availability, the structural indicators used to compute the dimensions and thus aggregate index are unlikely to change rapidly over time. And this is just based on their assumption. But as you can see, finance is here up at the top for advanced economies. And then we have utilities here for emerging economies. So they just state what the figure shows. We can skip over that and get into this right here. The finding of significant cross-country variation also carries over to the subcomponents of the index, as shown in annex figures A1 through A4. For all the subcomponents, the median values for emerging and developing economies lag behind those of advanced economies. For digital infrastructure, the median for AEs stand at 0.18, and that for EMDEs at 0.14. For innovation and economic integration at 0.16 versus 0.12. For human capital and labor market policies at 0.17 versus 0.14. and for regulation and ethics at point 20 versus point 14, respectively. And we can see here the AIPI index for advanced. We have Denmark, United States, Netherlands, Switzerland, Finland, all up here at the top. In emerging, we have Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, Czech Republic, People's Republic of China, all up here at the top. So I want to get into the robotics section of this. So I'm going to skip down to this right here. Besides Gen AI, another major technological innovation that everyone should know about that could affect developments in sectoral value added is the increasing use of industrial robots. That is most definitely going to continue to increase. Okay. The implications of roboticization for growth are likely to differ from those of Gen AI. In particular, industrial robots might boost growth through automation of blue-collar sector activity, while Gen AI could have impacts mainly through the productivity of white-collar workers. But I want you all to realize that both collars are going to be affected by automation. We can call it Gen AI, we can call it robotics. At the end of the day, it boils down to automation. So the BIS states to control for the impact of robot use on the growth in sectoral real value added, we use a data set of robots per employee at the country sector level. We have data on robots per employee for the following 7 sectors: agriculture, mining, construction, professional services, health, manufacturing, and utilities. For countries with missing values, we predict the stock of robots by regressing the stock of robots by sector on the country's real GDP per capita and the number of internet users per capita, using this data for countries where the sectoral robot stock is available. As we implement the regression at the sectoral level, we account for structural differences in robot use in the different industries. For sectors where data on robots are not available for any country, such as the government sector, we assign the country-specific minimum robot stock across industries for a particular country. And they state, finally, we normalize the stock of robots per employee by dividing the variable by the lagged sectoral real value added. I'm going to let you guys see here AI exposure with the AIPI index, share of value added, robot stock, and then they have observations, R squared, industry, country, etc. So tables 3 and 4 report the results for the baseline measure of AI preparedness and its subcomponents respectively when controlling for the stock of robots. The coefficient on the interaction between the sectoral AI exposure and the country's AI preparedness remains positive and statistically significant across all specifications, and its magnitude is very similar to that of the baseline model. At the same time, though, the robot stock variable is positively associated with sectoral value added growth, and its coefficient is statistically significant at the 5% level or better in the specifications that include both industry and country fixed effects. So let's get into the country level growth effects. At the end of the day, what are the implications of the previous estimates for growth at the country level? To address this question, the BIS stimulated the impact of an increase in the AI preparedness index on the growth rate of value added. The simulation is based on the estimates of the baseline model in Table 3. In particular, these estimates are obtained by predicting the growth rate of value added for a given sectoral exposure to Gen AI and a 1 standard deviation increase in AI preparedness. Then they take the weighted average of the predicted sectoral components, where the weights are determined by the share of each industry in total aggregate value added. The results are presented in Figure 5, as you can see right here. And it states they are expressed as deviations from the country with the lowest estimated increase in predicted real value added growth in the global sample. And they list here that Cambodia is the country with the lowest estimated increase in predicted real value added growth. So, Figure 5 shows that on average, generative AI is predicted to have a slightly larger short run impact on aggregate value added in advanced economies. In these countries, though, on average, the increase in real value added growth is about zero point 0.6 percentage points higher than in the country with the lowest estimated increase in global sample. In the emerging and developing economies, on average, the increase in value added growth is around 0.4 percentage points higher than in the country with the lowest impact. At the same time, there is substantial heterogeneity within each group. And you can see here for advanced, the estimated impact of AI on value added, Luxembourg is the highest. Okay. And for emerging, it's Hong Kong, followed by Singapore, and followed by the United States for advanced. And they dive into that. Among advanced economies, Luxembourg stands out as the economy that is predicted to benefit the most from AI in the near term, in part due to the large role of the financial sector in the country. The United States and United Kingdom are also among the advanced economies with some of the larger estimated growth impacts. Some countries in Central and Eastern Europe are estimated to experience smaller growth effects. Norway is also expected to experience a relatively small impact, largely due to the high share of the mining sector in its economy, which is very interesting. So among emerging and developing economies, the largest predicted impacts are found in relatively high income economies such as Hong Kong, SAR, and Singapore, where the share of the financial sector is also large. Notably, in the global sample, Hong Kong is surpassed only by Luxembourg in the near-term growth impact. In contrast, emerging and developing economies with a larger share of low-skilled, labor-intensive manufacturing are projected to experience smaller gains. So, what have we found? In conclusion, most of the previous research on the growth and productivity benefits of Gen AI has focused on the United States and, to a lesser extent, on the other major advanced economies. There has been much less attention to cross-country differences in the growth impacts of AI, particularly between advanced and emerging economies. Our paper, the BIS paper that we're talking about here, addresses this gap in literature. So what they're basically stating is this is the first time they really found that anybody has dived into the cross-country differences of AI adoption and the benefits of AI adoption, and comparing how some economies will benefit largely in compared to other economies. They state, we document that differential growth impacts across countries stem from differences in sectoral exposures to Gen AI, differences in countries' production structures, and their level of technological readiness. And the results suggest that on average, Gen AI is likely to benefit advanced economies more than their emerging market counterparts, thereby increasing global income disparities in the near term. So if you made it this far in the video, the point of me even pointing this out is if there's a disparity between countries in terms of benefits of using AI, what do you think it's going to be like on a smaller micro level when we talk about the individual level of people who utilize AI and benefit from AI and those who don't? And I'm more so focusing on people who have access to it. Those who have access to AI and choose not to use it, we're going to see disparities in those individuals as opposed to individuals who have access to AI and benefit from it by utilizing it. This is on a macro scale, but I love to make the comparisons of macro and micro, and this just sums it up in the grand scheme. So lastly, they state our results pertain to growth impacts measured in terms of gross value added. To translate these estimates into TFP equivalents and further into long-run cross-country projections, a structural model is needed that accounts for aggregate demand effects and intersectoral spillovers. We leave this extension to future research, and most you can count on them doing more research on this because they're just getting started. As you can see, they're citing things from a couple years ago. They're just getting started on their research on this, and the information is going to continue to come. The data is going to continue to compound, and we're going to see the implications of this technology on economies, whether it be advanced economies or emerging and developing economies, even on the individual level. In specific countries, specific communities, we will see the data, and it will show the disparities, because yes, this technology will allow for people to benefit from it, but there's always going to be someone getting left out, and you don't necessarily want to be that person.